If you want to improve battery life on Google Pixel 9a, we can do a couple of things to do so. So the first and foremost, we can go to the settings and open battery settings, where we can find a bunch of options related to saving the battery. For example, we can use the battery saver. Of course, the standard one is good enough to use, and of course you don't have to have battery saver enabled all the time. You can also create a schedule, and based on the selected percentage, the battery saver will be enabled automatically. So for example, you can set it to, let's say, 30% or 25% or 20%, and then you don't have to do anything. And then if you charge your phone, you can set it to automatically turn off the battery saver when the battery reaches 90%. However, if you have the battery limit set to 80%, then of course this one is pointless pretty much. So speaking about the 80% limit, we can of course set it up, but I'm just going to show you in a second. First, I want to show you the adaptive battery, which can be found over here. In the battery saver, we can tap here where we have the adaptive battery option. And here we can make sure that it is enabled. It is of course recommended to use the adaptive battery. And there we go. Here we have the charging optimization, where we can set the limit to 80%. So if you want to optimize the battery as much as possible, then of course you want to use this limit. Otherwise, we can just choose adaptive charging, which is also good enough. Any of these will do the work, so you should use at least one of them. And that's, I think, all in terms of the battery settings over here. The next thing that we can do is go to display settings. So let's scroll up, let's go to display and touch, and over here we can find a couple of different settings that have an impact on the battery, and some of these features can drain the battery much faster when they are enabled than otherwise when it is disabled. So first and foremost, we have the adaptive brightness, which is the automatic brightness. It is actually recommended to turn it on, so that when needed, of course, the screen brightness will be increased so that you can read whatever it is on the screen. However, when not needed, when you are, for example, in a darker room or something, then of course the adaptive brightness will decrease the brightness of the screen. Besides that, we also have lock screen settings over here. We're gonna go here in a second, but first let's scroll through all these display options. There's also the screen timeout, which is actually recommended to set to 30 seconds or 15 seconds. I think 30 seconds is the default value. And there is also the screen attention, which is of course quite convenient to use. But at the same time, you might also want to turn it off. However, I don't think that it matters that much. I don't think it has that big of an impact compared to some other options. So let's go back. Of course, dark theme also allows you to save the battery. If you prefer the light theme, you can, for example, set up the schedule instead of using dark theme all the time. So if you go to the dark theme, over here we have the schedule, and you can create a schedule for the dark theme so that it will be automatically enabled and disabled based on, for example, your own choice of time. Besides that, you should also be able to find smooth display, and of course this is the refresh rate of the screen. Actually, by default it is disabled, so you use 60 Hz, and I know the screen doesn't look that smooth. The animations are like lagging, you can say. It's not as smooth as with the smooth display, obviously. But of course, this allows you to save the battery. So it's really up to personal preference if you prefer to have smoother display or more battery. Now, of course, I believe that you should use this option since, well, you are paying for this feature. You paid for this feature to have it on your phone, so why not use it, right? So, like I said, it's up to personal preference. If you feel like you want to save as much battery as possible, then of course just turn this option off. And I think these are all things over here in the display and touch. So now we're gonna also go to the lock screen over here, because there are two more things that I want to show you. The first one is now playing. Apparently this feature drains the battery quite a bit, so you might want to turn this option off and just turn on when needed, or you can simply use the searched song feature that you have, for example, in Circle to search. And then we also have always on display, which is called here always show time and info. Of course, we want to make sure that this option is also disabled, because AOD just drains the battery as well. So I think these options that I had shown you just now have the biggest impact on the battery. So if you want to extend the battery life, the lifespan, then of course you can use these tips in order to optimize the battery. And if you want to prevent battery aging, or actually slow down the process of battery aging, it is actually recommended to keep the battery between 20 and 80%. So when you reach 20%, it is a good time to charge the phone. That's why, for example, you have the battery saver that has the 20% mark, let's say. And there is also the 80% battery limit. So this is for a reason, because this is how batteries are pretty much built nowadays. This is how they work, and this is how they are optimized. Or when you want to optimize them, then this is the rule that you need to follow, essentially. Of course, you can still charge from time to time to 100% if you want to, or you can drain the battery too for, let's say, 10% or 5%. It won't hurt that much if you do this once in a while, but generally speaking, you want to try to keep the battery between 20 and 80%. And that's it. Thanks for watching, leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and see you in my next videos. Bye!